A warm welcome to all our viewers to our series Natural Medicine. Professor Hans Rausch has honoured us again and again and explained a lot about TCM, especially about the teas which are contained in the compactates and have an incredible abundance of active ingredients. Today I'd actually like to talk to him about another point of view, because an active ingredient in traditional Chinese medicine comes from the inside out. And today I ask him, as a chemist and as a biologist, are there also active ingredients that can work from the outside in? And in this regard, it's an honour for me to have Professor Hans Rausch here again today. Hello, dear Hans. Hello, my pleasure. I'm not only well versed in TCM, but have also cared for years, in the meantime, decades actually, to the Western phytomedicine, because nature in this world works according to the same principles. Only the ingredients are different, and also mechanisms of action. But then, of course, you have to know the thinking models. For centuries, Western medicine has always tried to treat diseases manifested from the outside of the body. On the outside, to a certain extent, you have to look at the history, of course. We'll get to that. Well, traditional Asian medicine has, of course, the basic concept: diseases on the skin come from within. Well, you've seen it again and again on television, that when a wound is healing, you put 4 or 5 different plants on it, wrapped around it, or boiled an extract from it, and then tied it onto the wound. Yeah, this is the concept. So we now have, from the Western perspective, 2, let's say, historical developments. On the one hand, we have, I would say, Celtic influences. In our region, that brought all the phyto-knowledge to a certain extent, also into phytomedicine of modern times, and the Greco-Roman knowledge that was brought across the Alps via the monasteries. That means the combination, we're talking about Hildegard von Bingen, this lady too, basically has combined knowledge of the classic populations that settled here with the monastery knowledge from the south, one of the key people, but there are plenty of others, who then brought a lot of positive effects into this combination medicine. If we take a closer look now, we can even go back a little further. We're now in the Alps. Everyone has heard of Ötzi. Ötzi actually had, according to modern knowledge, among other things, therapeutics for wounds in his little baggage that he carried with him. Namely, birch extracts, with which one repeatedly treated open wounds in European cultures. So, the wound closure via the birch, via tannins, that we've discussed. Cultures have put certain leaves on wounds. Applying all the leaves to wounds works in spring, works in summer, but no longer works in autumn, and doesn't work at all in winter. So, what medicine, the monastery medicine, actually managed was to preserve the effect, even for times where it doesn't grow outside. So that means they operated a monastery garden to grow plants, to preserve the plants as much as possible, to dry them gently, to store them accordingly, so that they could use exactly the same therapeutic approach even in times when nothing grows outside, and still treat people. So the officinal knowledge, and we have terminology. In the West there are many plants with the name. For example, the dandelion is called Taraxacum officinale. Many plants have the surname officinale. And in German, the monastery pharmacy was called Officine. So that was the plant of which it was known that this species, but only this one, has a pharmacological effect and was used in the monastery pharmacy, with knowledge passed on from experience about the best time of harvest. When do you harvest them? Not too early, not too late, but when the active ingredient content is most optimal, it was harvested, was gently dried, in order to then store it in a storable form. We remember pharmacy cabinets that have lots of drawers. The many drawers were there to store the drugs, so the medicinal plants in dried form, in order to have them available in appropriate quantities throughout the year. So the therapy with fresh plants was the original form, from which then the drying and storage has evolved. But that was already common in Roman times, in ancient Greek times, in Egyptian times, and even in Babylonian times. That said, we basically also have at least 5,000 years of tradition in handling plant materials throughout the year, including beyond the growing season. We can, of course, go back even further, which then startles many people from Southeast Asia again when we say we found a grave of someone who was probably a healer in what is now Iraq, who was bedded at death on 12 medicinal plants. This means that the deposit on which the body was laid out were 12 typical medicinal plants that are still in use to this day. And from this we deduce that the man, it was a man, was considered a healer who was buried with his tools of the trade. Very interesting. So, 50,000 years. And these are, of course, cultural developments. But of course we should just sacrifice this old knowledge on the altar of modernity and be surprised afterwards when we run out of ideas for new active ingredients. Now you've told me that the Chinese work from the inside out. Here, in our Western world, we actually know to work with some creams, ointments, which are made available to us by the pharmacy. Are there such active ingredients, the extracts in there of herbal origin, combined with chemicals? Very few of them are really herbal. So, of course, you have to say one thing. Unfortunately, we have had a lot of armed conflicts in our historical development. That, of course, it was tried early to treat external wounds, which are not caused by organic damage, as in the way of thinking in Asian medicine, by intervention from the outside. So, from this warlike wound care, and according to today's historical understanding, we assume that Roman gladiators, though more or less doomed, were the best medically cared for people during their lifetime. I've heard that before. So, in this respect, the best care mainly was about how can I treat someone? Basically, opium poppies were used as a pain reliever, and of course today's modern pain therapeutics are also partly still on this basis. We basically get wound closures with plant extracts. So that means you not only sewed up, but you also had antibacterial effects via plants so that the wounds didn't become infected and lead to gangrene and so on. So that means that external intervention has a very long tradition in Europe. And does that still exist today? Wound healing ointments? And now I'll say something. There are still all the neurodermatitis cases where people are in terrible pain. There is, but actually, we lost a lot of old knowledge. I have to say now, of course, now I've been introduced here as more of a TCM expert, but as I said, I'm not only a TCM expert, but also I'm just as familiar with the Indian Ayurveda as with South American medicine in the rainforest, and also with African medicine. It is not like that. Then we still have a lot to do. We have a lot of topics. We have a lot to document. We can, but of course we also have a lot of knowledge in Europe And I tell you why I mentioned Ötzi before. Because I, of course, have tried to implement it, tried to modernize it in my own empirical studies. So, of course, you have to understand me as the head of a laboratory who has many employees for whose health I am jointly responsible. And we have the rule in chemistry: if someone injures themselves externally, so a cut, they are no longer allowed to work in chemistry from the time the wound occurs, not even with protective gloves and so on if they cut the finger. So an industrial accident, 2 weeks on sick leave, the employee is sent home because they can no longer work purely legally. Why is that? Very simple. From a purely scientific point of view, the skin barrier is still considered to be a better barrier to protect against foreign substances than any protective glove, no matter how good it is. So that means in order to protect the person from poisoning, they are sent home. But there we also have a large film of bacteria on our skin. We need this microbiome on the skin. That's one of the important criteria. But we smear it away with the disinfectants, yeah? Yeah, we're actually doing something very strange. We destroy the labile microorganisms on the skin through disinfection or extreme disinfection. And the pathogens are usually more robust. They stay on and multiply wonderfully. Great! So that means we're actually breeding a wrong microbiome through improper personal hygiene. Well, of course, you have to make a lot of differentiation. A lot of people will stone me again who will say, what kind of rubbish is he talking about? But if you really, and very few do that, dealt intensively with the microbiome, then your view of things would not match the current recommendations for action. Yeah, then you would really use a medical disinfectant. That looks different. Yes, exactly, but let's leave this topic. That's a different topic. We've also done an episode on this. But now again, the skin is injured, now it's clear. Now, chemistry can come in, and it mustn't. Right, and what typically happens when a wound occurs? Of course, we have an evolutionary principle that the carrier of the genome, who is able to close the wound as quickly as possible to prevent foreign bodies from penetrating, so to prevent infections, had the greatest evolutionary advantage. This means that our population is characterized by the fact that it has very good wound healing properties. But this wound healing is a rather uncontrolled, exuberant wound healing. We all know that. These are scars. We develop tissue that, from an evolutionary point of view, was absolutely correct to close the wound as soon as possible. No matter if it's pretty. The main thing is to survive. Beauty doesn't survive. Nowadays, of course, we go the other way. The concepts are about closing quickly, but closing them in a targeted manner, and to bring along a certain amount of aesthetics too. So almost free of scars, so coordinated wound closure growth, and not actually cancerous. Callus growth is uncoordinated. Of course, we also have to know how do the wound closure mechanisms work. The regeneration processes work in such a way that a destroyed cell cannot exchange with its neighbouring cell. And with that, the neighbouring cell knows exactly in the direction where I can no longer get a signal, so something must be broken, and then divides in such a way that it can close this gap again in exactly that direction. This means that the body breaks down the broken cells and creates the space, so that new ones can attach themselves there again, and are able to close this gap, this hole, cleanly again. The whole thing can be triggered. We heard from Ötzi beforehand. He used birch through targeted extraction from birch, one can obtain ingredients that do just that. That means we can massively trigger wound closure in its closure time. Namely, that these uncontrolled processes are pushed back and the controlled cell structure happens better. It's about T-cell induction. There are corresponding models, including scientific explanations of how it works. It's just a bit difficult. Attempts have been made to establish such products, but real herbal, let's say creams, that contain nothing but plants are extremely difficult to manufacture industrially because nature is complex. So industrially it is attempted to use a standard cream base. So to take a chemically based, petroleum-based basic matrix and to incorporate certain active ingredients. It works, but we're now bombing damaged skin with petroleum chemistry. Great. For my employees, in order to solve exactly the problem, I try to go completely different ways there to say, we don't need petroleum chemistry, we can fall back on the old traditions. It is working. We need a fat base that is almost identical to that of the skin in terms of fatty acid composition. Then the skin gets exactly the ingredients it needs to rebuild itself. So that means we nourish the skin with exactly what it would produce itself. So we support it in its work. Completely logical. That means, of course, I can't do that with an industrial grease that's easy to machine, with which I can work beautifully. That has a certain effect, works naturally as a cream, but with the limitation that the body can't actually do anything with this stuff. For the body, this is more of a foreign substance that it has to deal with again, although it has, of course, already been maltreated by a wound. So that means we actually torture the body additionally. Then we have a second problem. Western medicine always tries to cover wounds immediately, to close them immediately. Even that is not necessarily the best course of action. That was possibly a great advantage in evolution. Close as quickly as possible, then nothing foreign can enter. In today's environment, the germ load with pathogenic germs is so low that the risk of infection is in a completely different dimension. This means more in open air, then use a cream base that is permeable to air to speed up the regeneration process. So that means natural ingredients, the right active ingredients, air accessibility for the wound, ensures fast, clean and efficient wound healing capacity. What about scars then? Are there any scars at all? Massively reduced scarring. And now we come to the other area. The concept that I originally developed for wound healing for my employees has then been used in many field tests with people affected by neurodermatitis with open wounds, whether on the knee, on the elbow, where it's worst, where you always move it, where some of them have never healed, in the palm of your hand. So children who could no longer hold the pen in school because they had to write with open wounds, they usually become symptom-free after 2 weeks of treatment at the latest, but are not cured. Please understand one thing, we don't know what is behind this disease, cause and effect, but we know that we can have a massive positive influence on the symptoms, so the damage to the skin. And now comes the first limitation. If normal personal care products are then used again, the symptoms come back. So, our aggressive personal care products, whether that's a shampoo, when people have eczema on their heads, whether this is on the body with shower gel or in the hands with soap, if you use conventional products, the symptoms come back. That means we actually have a yo-yo game that the cream helps to reduce the symptoms, then it's washed away, and the symptoms come back. You can combine these products with appropriate additive products, and everyone who knows me knows that I said for a long time that the personal hygiene market doesn't interest me at all. Only when I learnt that with the current personal hygiene products, we torment our patients again afterwards. They get the symptoms again. We then build up our own series that specifically does not contain these things. And the patients buy the repair product once, and afterwards only personal hygiene products, because then they will remain symptom-free for years, including shampoo, including shower gel, even for babies. So there are 2 products now. No, there are a lot of products, so a whole product family that was created inevitably to be able to satisfy all the requirements from the consumer side or from the patient side to a certain extent. This means that the repair product is also available as a hair tonic or basically in spray form for the head. And there is no chemistry in it. Everything's natural. It's absolutely chemical-free. No hormones, because I read that also again and again. There's an old creed, the Rausch's Creed, which says, if I can't eat it, it doesn't come on my skin. And that actually causes everyone in the industrial environment to shake their heads a lot and say, it's not possible. But it is. We have provided proof that it works. Or I have provided my concepts. I'm not alone. I have a functioning team behind me that implements the thoughts that I formulate and then carries out the optimizations together with me. The product families are introduced, the products are known to insiders. They are, of course, only used to a limited extent in medicine, but as a matter of fact, there is a biological-based cream that is also available in pharmacies, with which then the pharmacist incorporates the active ingredients that a dermatologist prescribes, no matter what kind they prescribe, into this base cream, and the successes are usually faster, more efficient, and easier to observe. I only pass this on. That is information that I cannot scientifically prove myself, but it is described by doctors who say, we want this cream as the basis for our therapeutic approaches with some chemical active ingredients. Fits wonderfully. I think we're doing another episode about it. If I can't eat it, it won't go on my skin. I think that's a great topic, and then we'll talk more deeply about cosmetics, because I think a lot of the viewers at home don't know what they are doing with what they are doing. Well thought, well meant. Cheap shampoo, expensive shampoo, natural cosmetics, which again have nothing to do with nature, nothing is protected in this area. Anyone can use any designation if nature has been brought past it. It's sold as a natural product. Even in expensive natural products, petroleum chemistry is often included as a basis, and herbal extracts are only added. Whether these are also useful, who knows? There are extracts, we have seen it on the market for ourselves, for some extracts that are used, the hair on the back of my neck stands on end. On the back of the neck, well said. There isn't much left up here. In this respect, as I have previously formulated, where confused thoughts unfold, hair can be difficult to hold. So, in that respect, there are fewer on there. Whether the thoughts are so confused, then maybe for someone who does not understand what we're thinking. But we're going other ways and are proving that other concepts are realizable too. We'll come back to this topic again in the next episode, but now for the viewers who will want to hear something as a conclusion, where can you read more information about this ointment? How it works, where it works, what's inside, and oh God knows, is there a platform? There is a platform. There is a company that is now dealing with the marketing of these products called Natuurwerk. The information on the individual products is available at natuurwerk.eu, and the explanations, partly also the mechanisms of action, are described so that the user understands what they are doing. I'm always someone who doesn't like talking about it, but says, give it a try. When you notice how it works, it's worth more than all the hot air around it. We're still talking about it because I'm also interested in having young skin to slow down the aging process, let's put it that way. Age spots and God knows what is being propagated in the beauty industry. To what extent you can actually do that with such natural products? That's the topic of the next episode. Dear viewers, that was it again today. I hope we were able to give you a lot of valuable impulses again about this wonderful gentleman who shines with a knowledge I can only be amazed at. In general, of course, I find biology and chemistry an incredibly great topic because nature is a great gift for me from the good Lord to us humans, and we would be all well off if we really used this knowledge, these treasures, without breaking it in such a way that it has nothing to do with nature at all. So, that's it for today, Hans. Thank you. You stay here, we continue, and all the best to you. See you next time.